Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the 2016 season of Taking Liberties. We had a great season last year with 37 episodes. I think we went to 38, but I don't know. And hopefully we'll have a good season again this year. This is the third year that we're doing this. So without further ado, let's welcome back Tim from Victoria
Howdy.
and Lee over from West Australia.
Howdy.
All right, so we've got a great episode to start off on. Because the obvious thing that's happened is Malcolm Turnbull has decided not to commit troops to fighting ISIL, and that basically sent some conservatives into a spiral where they just wanted to, I guess, say we're not really doing anything for Middle East peace anymore. I think something along those lines. I don't know. I
The,
lost what.
what I've observed was since Malcolm Turnbull's become Prime Minister from the Conservative MPs who have spoken, also the Conservative commentators, is their main objection to Turnbull is he's not scaring us enough on terrorism. And so this is part of their campaign to keep terror in the news, to make Malcolm Turnbull look weaker and to undermine him.
Yeah, but how is that going to play out? I don't. I think so. It's now been 15 years since Australia's involvement in Afghanistan. 15 years since the United States got involved in Afghanistan. The World Trade Centers went down. We got involved to take out the Taliban. I think that it might be the case that the Australian people are kind of tired of this now. I don't think it resonates
And
as much.
well, a lot. Well, these conservatives who are speaking out, we may as well name them Kevin Andrews and Erica Betts. It's not so much that they think that there's this groundswell of support for another war in the Middle East. It's that they're trying to whip up the so-called liberal base of hardcore conservatives, and and so this is aimed
Can I just say
to
how funny
undermine.
that line sounds? Hardcore conservative base of liberals.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going.
And so this is designed to make sure that the base puts the pressure on Turnbull to uh, not be moderate. Is basically what the strategy is, so that they're all paranoid that he's going to turn the Liberal Party into a new Green Left Party, and so this is how it's playing out domestically.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of all tied to the end, like last year and the year before, just the constant stream of national security stuff. Really, we don't know for certain yet that Malcolm Turnbull was not going to be interested in following on from Tony Abbott's constant beating the drums for more national security stuff. But I guess maybe think this is another world they can go back to because really, it's hard to find any real, I don't know, like people who are against it. I know there's theoretically an anti-war movement, but when was the last time that was actually like a big deal? So if you want an easy free kick in the policy sphere without much resistance, well then saying we should go and fight all these fight ISIS is like an easy thing to talk about. Where if Erica Betts were to start talking again about penalty rates, that stirs up a lot of hate from the unions, and so I guess it's a relatively cost-free exercise in whatever the hell that politicians do.
Yeah, so my main okay, so I really pissed off a lot of conservatives on Facebook when I posted this. Um, so my main thing is, well, we haven't been invited by any of the host countries there for more troops. So Israel hasn't asked us for more troops. Syria hasn't asked us for more troops.
Well,
Iraq
Syria,
hasn't
we still
asked
want to
us.
get rid of us.
Yeah,
We're still trying to get rid of Assad.
Still, my point, my point is Lebanon hasn't asked us. Like any of the countries in the region currently dealing with ISIS have not asked us for additional troops. That's not to say they haven't asked for troops. They have asked for assistance. We've given it to them. We're currently the second largest armed force there after the Americans. So it's not as if we're not doing anything. The question is, should we do more? And quite frankly, I think Turnbull's made the right call on this. Nobody other than the US is asking for us, and the US isn't presenting a plan as to what they want to do with our additional forces. I mean, sure, you can make the argument that, hey, we have a moral obligation to help out when asked for help by potential allies. That's just standard statecraft.
Mm.
But in this case, it's not people there asking for our help. It's the United States, and it really seems to be something that they're doing out of, hey, we need to alleviate some of the pressure from us, and not so much based on these are the actual policy and strategic goals we want to address.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the US doesn't have much of a clue what the hell they're doing either. I mean, really, like this is
I
almost
think,
the definition of a no-win situation. Like,
yeah, I
okay,
think
if you beat ISIS, you've got Assad. Well, we don't like Assad. Okay, let's beat Assad. Oh, then you get ISIS. It's
baddies versus baddies,
yeah, that's it. I mean, like
and
even compared to, I mean, well, I guess Libya is a good example, like of how badly it went, because of intervention.
they're yeah, they're so complex, the issues in the Middle East. I mean, if you put ground troops in Iraq or Syria, you're going to get into the whole Shiite Sunni battle. I mean, part of the reason that ISIS is formed is because we installed a Shiite majority government in Iraq who took revenge on their former Sunni
Well, I mean, no, it's
oppressors.
not even we installed. It's we like they actually had legitimate elections, but that's just the issue that is like you've got these mixed population groups that don't get along very well. So it's not. I wouldn't even say that we installed a government in Iraq.
I
Like I think they actually had legitimate elections, but it's just that
they
it
they
happens
did
that
have
there's
elections.
Sunni that there's a Shiite majority in the country, and the Sunnis don't like the Shiites, and that's what happens. And also like just the weakness of the government. I mean, it's not exactly like the Middle East is known for its very strong central democracy, or government central governments run by in a democratic fashion. Like it's essentially you've got Israel. There might be a couple of others. I mean,
It
you
may
got
have been
Tunisia.
a democratic. It may have been a democratic election in Iraq, but I don't think you could say it was a government which respected human
No, and
rights,
yeah, that's
is
part of
what
the
I should
problem.
have
Yeah,
said.
that's yeah, that's exactly it. So
And
it's
I,
just
I believe we've covered it in an earlier episode that the US doesn't have clear foreign policy objectives here in the first place. I
yeah.
mean, Russia does. They're protecting a client state.
Mm.
The US's objectives seem to be a lot more muddled. It seems to be, hey, let's fight off ISIS. Let's also overthrow Assad. Let's make sure
It,
Israel's happy. And, you know,
I I really think that Obama's foreign policy, it seems to be that I don't want to get involved in any ground wars, but if I see an opportunity to take out a bad guy like Gaddafi or Assad, I'm going to do it.
yeah, yeah, that's probably accurate. Based on
And,
his.
and and he gets a free pass from not just the neocons such as John McCain, but also from the left wing media. If it's Obama getting rid of secular dictators, then it's perfectly okay.
Yeah, but he's getting rid of dictators, right? That's we like
Obama.
him getting rid of dictators, right?
Well, it worked out well. How well did it work out in Libya?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, but that's not an argument to keep a dictator around, in my opinion.
Well, not to actively try and get rid of him.
Yeah, sure. So what you're saying is basically hands off and let's see if the problem solves itself.
Well, the thing is,
Well, isn't it?
there is no solution here because every option is bad. You can have a less bad option, but I mean that's still not a great option. Like it's like
If,
essentially you've got a place that's been mired in a shitty political situation for like centuries. Because before all this, there was the Ottoman Empire, which wasn't exactly like a barrel of laughs.
Yeah.
So like it's just there's this like literally there's hundreds of years of development that needs to go into whatever final end state that actually is a positive thing, and you can't
but,
circumvent that process. You can't
but
jumpstart to stable, peaceful democracy just out of the situation we're in.
every intervention that the US and the West has done over the past, I'd say, 60 years in the Middle East has just made the situation worse every time.
Yeah. And
I
in
mean,
fact, it's
going back to
actually well. I mean, if you look at essentially, like you go back to what happened with the Shah in Iran, like essentially, it is the
yes,
instigating. Like in some ways, that is the beginning of a lot of these issues because, like you've,
which was done because of Cold War politics.
yeah, exactly. And as a result, because the US has an issue with Iran because they had the Islamic revolution. All of a sudden, they're supporting Saddam Hussein because he doesn't like the Iranians either. And so it just becomes this. And I mean, the Mujahideen, also a Cold War politics, supporting the Mujahideen and finding Osama bin Laden and helping him, getting him involved in terrorism, financing terrorism. Like it's all just a big mess. And yeah, it's just they just
Yeah,
it's all blowback. I mean, that's in the end, you can't escape the consequences of your actions, and in a massive way, that's
to
the
sort
issue.
of bring it to sort of bring it back to like our involvement though, like Australia's involvement. I mean, our current level of involvement seems to be that we're helping out with some strategic bombing. I think we lent some jets, um, and that's about it, really. I mean, we've got something like 400 soldiers over there.
Yeah,
I think that's at least that's what the article read. I don't know the actual number because I'm pretty sure our defense force doesn't actually release proper statistics on the stuff. It'd be an operational matter.
yeah,
So, yeah, for me, I'm not entirely opposed to saying we should send more troops, but it should come from people there asking for it. Good. Generally, if you've got a good hosting country, your chances of success in any intervention are slightly better. And if, like, it's the difference between being hailed as liberators in France and being derided as war criminals, as what happened in Iraq.
Well, I go by the fact that yeah, like I said before, every intervention that we've done has just made things worse. And the fact that it's so complex, the conflicts over there, that whatever side we take, it's going to make the antagonies between the Sunnis or the Shiites or any other group there much worse.
yeah. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
I,
sorry, continually.
I was just gonna say, like, for me, it's more of just we shouldn't commit troops because we're sending people to potentially die for no purpose. So there's there and like there's no we actually don't have a stake in the outcome. I mean, I guess like the conservative commentariat would say, oh yeah, but we have to defeat ISIS because of all these attacks around the world. Well, yeah, except it wasn't actually ISIS that did any of that. Like the ISIS itself is busy trying to survive in Iraq. Like it's too busy
Yeah.
dealing with its own crap. All these other people are people who are inspired by Islamic State. They're
Yes,
inspired by
that's
an
exactly
idea.
right.
If you defeat the organization, the idea still exists. Like it's not like if you beat ISIS, all of a sudden all these like murderous Islamic fundamentalists just like throw up their arms and go, well, that didn't work out. I'm never going to do that again. They just find a different cause to rally around. Before ISIS, it was Al Qaeda. But like ISIS hasn't actually provided any training or material. All they've provided is just an idea that already existed and already had,
And a
you
good
know,
social media propaganda machine.
yeah, that's it. And somebody who will replace ISIS. Like there's, unfortunately, in the world we live in, there is a market for murderous ideologies, and if ISIS go down, there'll be somebody to replace them. So we actually don't have a stake in the outcome. Let Turkey, let Russia, let Saudi Arabia, let Syria, let Lebanon, let Israel even. If Israel want to get involved because they're worried, let them go and bomb the crap out of them. Like I think I wouldn't have an issue with that. But yeah, there's just we have no stake, and we're gonna send people over to potentially die for no reason. And I just think that's just a waste in every conceivable way. So yeah,
Fair enough. I guess we'll. I guess we can make that the last message on this topic, seeing as I think we all agree generally that sending troops there is a bad idea. Um, how about the next topic, which we were going to talk on, which was basically relating to what happens on the civilian side of this component, where basically a whole bunch of asylum seekers went to Europe, and it turns out that some of them have basically been, sorry, some of them were part of the big Cologne rape thing that happened in New Year's Eve.
And
over
similar
in Germany.
stuff's happened in other German
Twin
cities, and
cities. Yep.
plus in cities across Europe, they're seeing
Yep.
huge rises in the rates of sexual assault and rape.
So here's the thing, right? Some people are using this as a proxy to basically discuss immigration in general. But for me, the thing is, Sweden, sorry, not Sweden, Norway. So Norway actually has this integration component. So, like, one of the things that America did really well, and I'm talking, prior to various instances where they started shutting down their borders, is that they didn't particularly like the groups of people coming in. So they did this entire forced integration. So, well, not really forced integration, but like this thing to get people to learn the lay of the land. You have to sort of understand the laws of the land. And some people might construe that as, hey, that's a little bit racist or xenophobic because, there's people coming from overseas. They're not necessarily, there's the multicultural thing. Um, that's actually complete bullshit, by the way. If you're coming from somewhere else and you're having trouble understanding the laws of the land, that should be an indication that you either have to learn the laws of the land or get the fuck out. There is only one laws of the land. I'm sorry. That and if you're culturally sensitive to something else, that's not how it works. Uh, you, I mean, like my personal opinion is much more aligned with open borders, but I do frequently say, look, there is a law of the land, and that applies to everyone. I don't buy into the multicultural aspect of law. And I think and I think that when people like criticize more open border policies, they do often use that as a proxy to attack multiculturalism, which in my opinion should be something that should be attacked because it has obvious flaws that need addressing, and it's something that was half thought out. Sorry, I'm rambling now.
Yeah. I mean, like I think so. I mean,
I've combined everything into
yeah,
one.
I was going to get into the second issue. So I mean, I guess like we were talking about integration and what causes people to form ghettos and how it might be different in the US as opposed to Europe. Is Europe's got these massive welfare states, and my argument, which I think I've raised here before and say elsewhere, is that massive welfare states subsidize hate towards other people
Correct.
because essentially you can go to a country, you
Whether it's
don't ha-
hate of the rich or whether it's hate of a minority group, yes, it
yeah
subsidizes hate.
yeah
Yeah.
like essentially allows you to do nothing and hate everybody else and hate all the people who essentially create the wealth that allow you to live on the wealth and on the dole. Because I mean, like when they have all these articles that talk, go to these like places in London where it's become a ghetto essentially, and they interview all these people. They're all on welfare. They're all on the dole because if you have to have a job and you actually, I mean, none of these sort of smaller communities are viable in and of themselves. Maybe there might be some people who are like a halal butcher or something, but broadly speaking, if you've got a couple of thousand people of an ethnic group, they have to get jobs outside of that ethnic group unless they're going to be poor, which most people don't like. I mean, they move to Australia so they can become richer and have nice houses and have all the nice things. So, but if you just give them welfare, if you just like allow them to live on the taxpayer dollar, then they can hate everybody. Because if you hate, it's very hard to get a job if you hate everybody. Like if you have to go and work for the infidel, and you have to go and associate with them daily, and leave your community, and you go see the outside world, you have to actually be nice to them. But
Yep.
if you can live in this little geographical area with people who only speak your language, with and have a religion that for in many parts of the world is very hostile to Western values, um, it's really easy to just live like that when there's money coming from no one because you're just living off the taxpayer. So I think we need to talk more about the incentives around those attitudes because if you actually like you know there are places in the world like Australia, broadly speaking, like America, where immigration's worked really well. And I think part of it's probably because we haven't, at least up until recently, had these massive welfare states, not anywhere near like what Europe has. And I think that's forcing people to get jobs, forcing people to associate with others, is how you minimize that. I mean, it's not perfect. You're still going to have frictions. You still, and especially like long-held enmities between ethnic groups. So putting Croatians next to Serbs and Bosnians, like they always going to have issues there. But broadly speaking, I think a lot of this is driven just by the welfare state.
Well, socioeconomic politics.
Yeah, yeah.
I would be. I tend to agree. Now, I'm not sure how it is in Europe, but we do some bad things here, where we force asylum seekers onto welfare.
Hmm.
So, like for example,
Yeah,
yeah, like
it's
yeah,
the reason why it seems that our immigration or refugee policy doesn't work very well is because, as you said, they're banned from working. I mean, it's
Yeah,
the complete opposite of what it should be.
correct,
absolutely.
yeah, and that's why I'm a huge fan of the LDP's 50K tariff essentially. Like, sure, buy your way in, go work. If you want to bum around on welfare, you paid 50K. The government's already made its money, so it's not like it's
Well,
like you're getting your money back.
I guess from my perspective, I just think why not just take away welfare for refugees? Like just say, like just have a situation where anybody can come, but you just don't get any money from the government. Like I think
Which
that's
is my ideal system.
yeah. I mean, like I don't think it's hard to sell to Australians. We're not going to give these foreigners money. Like that's in my
You
understanding
would
of
be
I mean,
politics.
that
surprised. You
Well,
would be
sure,
surprised.
okay, so maybe within the Greens and stuff, like there's a
No,
bit
no,
there.
no. Even the
Like
liberals. So the liberals even argue like, oh, hey, they're all going to come over, right? And you can't not give them welfare because, well, the Greens or someone else will covet them as like as a political voting group, and then then they'll all vote for that party. And I'm sitting there going
that's
like, how
that's
the
the
hell do they have voting rights?
yeah,
well,
Like
that's
that.
the Ann Coulter immigration argument, where we shouldn't legalize the Mexican immigrants because they'll all vote for
yeah.
Democrats.
So I mean, like I'm
How do they
totally
get voting rights the day they arrive?
yeah,
I didn't have voting
yeah,
rights the
exactly.
day I arrived.
I mean,
How does
like
that fucking work?
David Leinhelm, I think he's raised the possibility about making it harder to become a citizen, and I'm actually okay with that idea. Like,
Sure, as
like
long
if you're gonna have more immigrants, like I think like making
sure,
it possible to making the hurdles larger to sort of make it so it's only people who are actually committed to the country and to the values of this country, like they actually get to vote and stuff. But people
sure,
can come and go as they please. Like you have much more
pretty
generous
much.
immigration and just remove the welfare. And I think that's. I mean, it's different. Like it's obviously like any change to any sort of political status quo is difficult, but like I think
So,
that's a sellable one.
I
so
know that there's we've obviously talked about the problems with modern immigration, and I know that a lot of libertarians they defend the nostalgic view of immigration where it was 100 years ago, where you came to the new country, you worked, you settled, and had a family there. But but these days, with our most recent problems with immigration have been because we've introduced the welfare state, as you said, Vic, is incentivized. Oh, it
no,
was, I
Lee
think it
said
was
no, no. Lee said that.
Lee said that
Yeah,
incentivizes people to stay, people to stay in ghettos, and also the fact that we we still suffer from, well, a lot of the establishments that suffers from white guilt. So we don't want to say that any foreign practice is
yes.
wrong.
But see, here's the thing. A lot of those. Here's the thing. Saying that we should stop immigration because of those institutions is actually one of the most. These institutions actually aren't designed to. They're leeches on existing institutions. So, like for example, the entire sort of white guilt factory or whatever it is, that's built onto the institution, the former institution of British imperialism, essentially. And these things are proverbial fifth columns within these institutions that cause them to collapse. Now, that's a problem for conservatives because institutions are important, but libertarians generally are of the opinion that institutions should be built, sorry, some libertarians, not all. There are conservative libertarians that argue that old institutions are important. My position is that institutions stand or fall on their merits, and you should be able to you should be able to make your decision on the fly whether an institution is worth saving or not. But sorry, coming back to the point because I'm rambling again. These institutions are basically parasites. Sorry, these structures are parasites within institutions, and they exist only to destroy them. Um, Immigration is one of those things that builds an entirely different institution and or strengthens existing institutions. In essence, immigration would be the thing that kind of stops this thing. Sorry, that sort of destroys these fifth columns. Is what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to get at. In a sort of general,
Yeah,
growing the market sort of way.
maybe. I guess part of the issue with immigration is it's always unknown. Like we don't know how the future's going to turn out. You've got all these. We've seen. I always argue in favor of immigration from past experience, which has always been that whatever group is coming over, they're the devil. They're disruptive, and they follow the culture, and whether it's Catholics, whether it's Wogs, whether it's Vietnamese, whoever it is, like it's always been the case that there's been animosity towards immigrants. But that's not to say that this current crop of all these Muslims coming from the Middle East or from sort of North Africa or and Central, Sudan's North Africa, whether that will actually still be the case. So,
Well,
I
that's
mean,
why.
it's clearly that we're dealing with something different than a different strand of Christianity or a different ethnic group. I mean,
Well, yes.
we started
Also,
this conversation. Talking about the rapes in Cologne. I mean, this
mm,
is a probably a new a layer added on top of that. The fact that what's coming into Europe is a very hostile anti-liberal culture.
well, yes, partly that. What I was actually going to say is it's also largely different in the demographic makeup. So, a large number of these asylum seekers have been young males aged between
Yes.
18 and 35, which is, I mean, if you take a look at the boats, sorry, if you take a look at the history of, basically asylum immigration, it tends to be young families. At least it
Yeah.
was.
Well,
And
the men are going over first, so they can first get asylum and then take advantage of the family reunion policy. And so, at the moment, what they said, 1 million refugees have entered Europe. So if you say times that by 4, that's what could potentially come over in the future.
Okay, so my this is why I liked Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada's policy on this one. He basically said we're not going to take the single males, we'll take the families, right?
mm.
So basically, it sent the signal out that hey, come with your family, then you'll get accepted. Um, although, like, that's one way to sort of tackle this problem.
Which, by the way, can I
But
can I interject to say, like, that would happen if you had more liberal immigration. So part of the
Yeah,
issue is like they make it hard to get in the first place. So it's therefore more advantageous to send the young men to go and then bring the families with them. If you just made it easy from the outset to get to Australia or wherever, they'd just all come over in the first place. So
correct. And
yeah,
if you take a look at the skilled migration program, that is exactly what
yeah.
happens. So it's not, and actually I actually think I have to wonder if this change that we're seeing, where it's a larger disproportionate number of young men coming, if that's because we've tightened our asylum seeking policies over the years, because they did used to be much more liberal,
Mm.
particularly in America after World War II. Um, so yeah, is this how people seeking asylum would respond? You would send the people most likely to find work, the people most likely to set up your
I
houses.
think, well, this is my opinion that they're sending the males because they're the ones who are most likely to navigate their way towards Europe. If they're making the trek by themselves, then it's much easier to get them rather than having to look after a whole family.
Yeah,
Plus, also, if you want to work as an unskilled labourer, working, like working on construction or working on in agriculture, like that's easy. Like a young guy can do that relatively easily.
But they're
If
not coming over to work as we just described. I
well,
mean, they're
yeah, I
going
guess
straight into public housing and accommodation and getting welfare.
true. Yeah, good
yeah.
point.
Well, no, in Australia, I don't know what the case is in
Oh,
Europe.
I'm talking about Europe.
Yeah, I'm pretty. I don't think they get welfare in
I
Europe.
mean,
If,
there's
if
also the
you if
possibility
you
they're
read
working
the
illegally. So I mean, that's the other thing. Like, if you're going to go work illegally in whatever low skill work there is available, that's again easier for a young guy to do than
No,
necessary for families.
yeah. So the other thing is also like the other thing that I tackled early on was that Norway doesn't seem to have a problem with this integration concept, and they don't have as much of a problem, or rather, they haven't had as much of a problem yet. Um, but I mean, it seems to be a question. Why is it difficult to tell asylum seekers what the laws of the land are in this case? I mean, it seems to be that they want to like there was this entire story that came out where the Cologne police tried to, um, not try and harm the feelings against the asylum seekers by suppressing the fact that some of them were asylum seekers. I'm just like,
It's because they don't want to ever imply in any way that their cultural values and laws are better than anyone else's through the world. I mean that is what it is.
Well, to be fair, that is an issue in Germany that's probably got some historical precedent. So, I can kind of see
no,
that. But
I actually don't. I actually,
But teaching new immigrants not to rape and
yeah.
treat women with respect,
yeah,
I
Well,
hardly
but see,
think that's
I,
bringing
I,
back the swastika.
I'm actually with Tim on this. I think we can make certain assertions that are objectively true.
oh no, I'm not saying
Um,
that.
to
Yeah,
give
yeah, yeah. I'm not saying they shouldn't be told. I'm just saying like it's understandable why the Germans might be a bit antsy about sort of declaring that their culture is the best.
All right, if there
Um,
are Germans listening to this show, guys, get some balls.
yeah.
Seriously, it is absolutely fine to tell people it is not cool to rape.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
it's not the police's job to tell them that though. It should be the
No,
community,
no, it should be the
the
community.
diaspora of wherever they're coming from. I mean, because that's essentially like, again, to go back to the welfare state. If there was no welfare state, they'd be lodging with fellow families, relatives who have come over already. There would essentially be,
If there was no welfare state, a lot of them probably wouldn't come. That's also
uh,
another thing.
maybe not, maybe I don't know, but like they essentially
Yeah,
they'd have
it's
to
no,
work
no.
with the
I
existing
actually,
community.
I don't have a problem agreeing with that. It might well be true. There might be enormous pull factors, and I've always considered. Like, I think so. I am an open borders advocate. I think a lot of open borders advocates fail to really recognize how much of a pull factor welfare is. But the thing is that in that lies the mechanics to actually take down the welfare state. The welfare state cannot survive an influx on that magnitude. And this is understood by people who want closed borders. They say the welfare state can't possibly survive.
Well,
And I
yeah,
think
maybe.
that it's a grave error that libertarians make when something like the European migration problem does happen. The first thing they want to do is shriek open borders, yet don't explain how that would actually work in practice and how it's
Yeah, and
different from the current situation. I
so
mean,
I think
what we have now
I'm
is
happy.
not.
I am happy to explain it to you. No, sorry, I'll let you finish. Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going.
So no, you go.
Are you sure you were in the middle of a rant and I interrupted you?
I've forgotten it now. So
Wow. Okay, sorry. No, I will explain it. This is mine, and it may not necessarily reflect every open borders advocate, but generally, my position is if they can come in, you know, acquire property, sorry, rent or, basically stay somewhere, as long as they can work, as long as they can fund themselves, as long as they're basically contributing towards the market economy there is nothing to essentially stop them. Treat them as any other good or service coming into the country. I mean, we don't have a problem with fly in, fly out engineers, for example, like countries which need very high tech experience from um, technologically proficient people fly into the country, they do their job, they fly out, or they might stay there for a couple of years while they're getting the project done. Like at the upper echelons of labor, we don't have a problem with this. We only seem to have a problem with it at the lower echelons. And I think it's largely because of the conflation with the welfare state. But if you take a look at what happens with managers, with technical specialists, with basically any high degree, high speciality position, right? For those people, visas, borders, they're largely meaningless because countries invite you to come and work. And they don't experience anywhere near the problems that these unskilled laborers have. And I think the reason why the unskilled laborers have these problems is because of bureaucracy. It's because of various welfare systems, or various bureaucratic systems designed to pay or stop people from working, and generally labor laws. I think.
Good,
Sorry, continue.
good. Yeah. I was going to say good. You explained it, which is more than I hear from a lot of other libertarians on
It's
Facebook.
yeah, it's because I'm in that category of engineers that can fly to any country whenever I want.
And it's also because there's always these articles popping up that saying, oh, immigration, built, or it's usually America. Yes, but it was immigration under a different circumstance.
Correct. Yes. Um, yes. Like I said, most open borders people do not emphasize. Sorry, do not sorry, minimize the level of involvement the welfare state has, and it is quite detrimental. Actually, the
Yeah,
welfare
but
state.
let's be fair. Like open borders, most open borders people are against the welfare state. Also, like the correlation there's pretty
But they don't
strong.
often
So
say it clearly enough, in my opinion.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like they do. Like I feel like it's always constantly coming up that people who are for
Yeah.
open borders say the welfare state's stuck. The welfare state sucks, and we should get
Yeah.
rid of it. And that open borders are incompatible. Like even someone like Brian Kaplan, like I've heard him talk about it extensively.
Well, yeah.
So
But
Brian. Yeah.
yeah, but
Brian Kaplan is the one that convinced me of. So he's basically pointed out the welfare system falls under its own weight, under open borders, essentially. Um, that's unavoidable, and there's no amount of democracy that can stop that.
But as you said at the beginning, Vickers, it definitely was you that also culture counts for something,
Correct.
and this is also another factor that for open borders to work, I mean, people have to have a basic set of principles that they all agree on.
actually, so can I just come back to you about the thing where you said, when there were different kind of sect of Christianity or different ethnic group. The reality is, though, back in that time, the difference between Protestant and Catholic was huge. So people say, well, because I bring that up and say, oh, they had a problem with the Catholics. Well, yeah, but they're just Catholics. Or they're just Italians. They're all Christians as well. Yeah, but it's not so much how we see it now as the difference between us and them. It's how they saw it at the time. And if you go back and look at the rhetoric, at the
You're
time,
talking
it
about
was just as
rhetoric,
yeah, but
but you're
like
not talking. But
oh, let me finish. Like people hated the Catholics, people hated the Wogs, people hated the Vietnamese just as much as they hate the Muslims now. And at the time, the culture was very different. So, like Protestant and Catholic used to mean a lot more than it does now. Like we look at it now and think, oh, how can you possibly fight over these things? But it was actually two very different, for very particular historical reasons. Like it was two completely different worlds: the Protestant world and the Catholic world, even in Europe. Well, especially in
To
Europe.
to
But
to be fair, I understand the Catholic position. I mean, there's a whole bunch of heathens talking about this,
but
Archbishop
Lee,
of Canterbury
yeah,
business.
but it's
but Lee, as
sorry, you go.
yeah, as you just stated, it was rhetoric. I mean, there weren't any in Australia Catholic Protestant riots, or there wasn't violence or terrorism occurring in Australia on every few months or so, as we're
Well,
seeing
Well,
there wasn't
as
Ireland,
Europe.
There
Yeah,
was
with the
Ireland.
exception
There
of
were,
Ireland.
and
yeah.
no, there were whole wars fought over this too.
Yeah, they tried to blow up the English Parliament because Catholics tried to blow up the English Parliament. That's why we have Guy Fawkes Day. Like
Yeah.
it's not just a theoretical exercise like the animosity between Protestant and Catholics. Like it's a real thing.
I'm
And
talking about the modern Australian experience
sure,
here. I mean,
it doesn't mean anything now. But
anyone
if
can.
you go back to 1900 and say and looked at the relation, the interaction or kind of the
You don't
dynamic
even have to go
between
back to the 1900s. You could go back to the 1950s, and people
well,
would be like,
probably. But I think particularly back, I mean, because it's got basically stages of this kind of anti-immigration sentiment, and back in that time, like it was that people really did have a problem with the Irish Catholics, and it's not, they were a completely different culture. We think of it as being completely compatible now, but back in that time, it was not. And back
I'm
in the
not convinced of
50s,
that actually.
and back in the 50s, this Southern Europe, yes, like the Southern and Eastern Europeans were a completely different culture. Like it was a very different world. Like today we think of, it's all kind of the same, but actually it's actually a very different world back then.
So but yeah.
So I mean,
So you're by what you're
sorry, go.
yeah. So by what you're saying, you're confident that all of this conflict between between Western culture and Islam will blow over. That seems to be what you're implying.
Uh, well, I don't think it will blow over in a geopolitical sense. Like I think there's legit there's real issues in the same way as Italian democracy still sucks and Greek democracy still sucks. Like there's real reasons for the geopolitics, but I think immigrants that come here, like sort of notwithstanding the welfare state and other things, but generally speaking, people who come here will integrate. And if we can get rid of crappy policies like welfare, I think that will help a lot. But I don't think there's anything inherently. I don't know if it's inherently incompatible. Like I don't think there are problems that are insurmountable when it comes to different cultures coming together and living together within the same borders. And I think things will work out in the end, even if there are some bad incidences along the way. Um, and as best we can tell, although what happened in Cologne was terrible, it's not like part of some long-term campaign to rape European women. So, yeah.
The main issue that is being brought up the most with all their, I wouldn't say just conservative commentators, but that there is not the ability to name the problem, that there needs to be a calling out of this is a problem with mainly Muslim immigrants, and we need to name that and also treat it like we would uh, if it was a native that committed the crime.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't aware that they weren't treating it like a native had committed the crime. I thought that they
But
were treating them all as rapists, to my knowledge.
But there's an inability. What I'm saying is there was an inability initially to admit that this was a problem with immigrants, and this is an issue where immigrants needed to be integrated about proper liberal democratic laws.
Yeah, and I think I conceded that at like almost 30 minutes ago now, where I said, what Norway has done and what the
Yeah,
United States
yeah.
used to do
I
and
do
what
credit you
Australia used to do. Yeah.
for crediting you at the start,
Yeah.
but I'm just making the point because Lee has overemphasized that it's mainly the welfare state, where it's these two issues combined that we need to be able to defend liberal values, but also we need to get rid of the welfare state distorting everything.
Sure.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with any of that.
Yeah, neither do I. There's no contention. I think both of us agree with you on that.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe we should move into a third topic since we've come to an agreement.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah. 3 libertarians agreeing on a topic. That's,
wow.
That's unusual. That's got to be. Congratulations, everyone! You just heard like history in the making.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, which means I drew a complete blank on what I was.
So we're going to talk about George
right,
Brandis.
Brandis. Yeah. George Brandis and his metadata. That's right. I don't want to know where you live, just the address.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what can I say? We told you so. So George Brandis's entire, metadata thing, the thing he couldn't explain properly. Well, now it's expanded out. I think originally it was only something like 20 or so agencies, but now they've expanded it out to 60 agencies, and they were kind enough on the list. So the Guardian basically released the list. They were kind enough when releasing the list to redact the name of the 4 agencies that wanted to be able to warrantlessly wiretap us. How nice that they get some privacy.
Well, it's not so much that they actually have access yet. So essentially, these 60 plus agencies, 61 agencies, have applied to be treated as enforcement agencies that have access to the metadata. So they haven't actually, I don't know if they've got it yet, but they're asking for it. And it includes, I'm sure one of us has a list. Okay, we got things like the Australian National Measurement Institute, Australia Post, Bankstown City Council, the Civil
Actually,
Aviation Safety Authority.
the one that pissed me off, and everybody should join me in this once I yank it out, Taxi Services Commission,
Mm.
Victoria.
Yeah, Racing Queensland, because those guys really need to be in the terrorism busting game. RSPCA, so like, essentially, I guess this is a great case in point of like how you get sprawl in government. So they come in saying we
Clean
need
Energy Regulator. The Clean Energy Regulator.
yeah.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
I guess the US also has this, where essentially you have these laws that are cited as these are absolutely necessary. Yes, we're getting all this sensitive data, but it'll only be the people who absolutely need it. We're going to protect your privacy, blah 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 blah. And what happens is government inherently just sprawls out, and just more and more things get sort of brought in under this overall banner of terrorism. And
Bankstown City Council. You're a fucking city council. Why the hell do you need metadata? What the fuck is wrong with you guys?
Well, I mean, it's the same reason as the ATO. Essentially, it makes their job easier because they can just invade your private. They can just go and take this information without getting to get a warrant.
Well, ATO was in the original list, so I'm not too surprised about that. What I am surprised about is like some of these agencies, just like, what the hell? Harness Racing, New South Wales. Who the hell are they? Why the hell do they need metadata?
I mean, yeah, as you just said, I mean, government always wants an excuse to grow, and bureaucrats are very lazy and want to find the easiest way to get the information they're after. So I mean, this is a classic example of we've allowed the size of government to grow, and long and behold, the agencies have just embraced it.
Yeah, and the thing is, they don't actually have, like, it's not like they're footing the bill for this. We're going to be footing the bill for this, and so why wouldn't you want access? I mean, like, feasibly, like the Australian National Measurement Institute probably doesn't have, many reasons to be getting involved in all this sort of stuff. But if they can get it, why wouldn't they? It's.
Oh, by the way, just out of curiosity, if people are wondering how much this program is costing us, it's $300 million a year.
Was that just the money that they're paying in compensation to the telcos, or was that the actual cost of the program?
That's just the money that they're paying to the telcos in compensation. Nobody knows the actual.
Yeah, we don't actually know at this stage how much it costs for them to store all our data.
No.
And this is just we haven't even got that far into data retention, and this is all already happening.
Yeah. Well, sorry, it's not even. It hasn't even officially started. I think it starts.
No, I think they've already started.
No. The official legislation start date was something, but they gave extensions to the ISPs because all the ISPs said they weren't ready.
Right.
They didn't have accredited systems or something like that. I remember reading it on The Guardian. But yeah, it was. Hang on, I read it on The Guardian. It should be suspect immediately. Sorry. Let me just get back to the topic. Yeah. So
just what they're asking to be declared as criminal law enforcement agencies. That's what these organizations apply to be. So I guess that just shows you how ridiculous it is when.
I knew it. Racing New South Wales, they are definitely a criminal.
Yeah. Law enforcement. Yeah.
Law enforcement agency. Yeah, just like the Taxis Commission.
Department of Health. Yeah. So it's just it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Center. I don't.
Well, see that makes sense because they like I think they get into money laundering and stuff.
Isn't that APRA?
No, I think Austrackers they're the ones who deal with the terrorism.
It's Austrac. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, those guys it actually kind of makes sense because if there is a valid reason to have this sort of metadata, they follow the money for all the anti-terrorism financing cases and stuff like that and criminal gangs.
Okay. You know what?
So,
eventually you find one that you like.
A broken clock is right still twice a day.
Twice a day. Yeah. Greyhound Racing Victoria, maybe not so much.
The Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency.
Primary Industries and Regions, South Australia.
I didn't know half of these organisations were government agencies.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, it exposes that how many agencies the government has.
Yeah. Well,
Which
I
is why they can go through this process every year of closing down all of these government agencies because there just are so many that hardly do anything.
Yeah, what I'm really surprised by is how many how into gambling the states are. There are so many gambling agencies. It's
Well,
just
because
like,
they
wow.
because they want the money. They can't raise any taxes themselves, so
Okay, then my next point was also why the fuck are so many taxis involved in the Victoria? Like, does Victoria understand that taxis are private cars, right? Like, I didn't
where
they
where should
probably
be
chased down Uber drivers.
or
understand.
track down Tim Andrews.
For a spider web of hate groups.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, no, no. This is yeah. I'm just like, yep. This is pretty much Royal Society for the Prevention and Cruelty to Animals. RSPCA. Okay, no, sorry. I'm gonna get less distracted by this list. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a typical example of government overreach and sprawl. Like you said, for the reasons of hey, if we can get access to it, we totally should.
Mm.
Um, which is probably the number one reason why you should not trust the government with your private data.
Yeah.
And always beware when they've use a crisis, which was the terrorists are coming to get us again. I mean, they've used a crisis to expand government, which is a classic example of how government grows. Using a crisis to say you need to we need to pass this law to make us all safer, and long and behold, it allows government to grow.
Well, government grows anyway. It's just
But war and security issues make it expand faster and further.
I mean, and particularly
yes.
like I mean, if you look at the US with a lot of their all sorts of different policies, but it all ends up being used in drug enforcement. I mean, I guess police militarization is the big one, where they're giving
Mm.
all this tanks and guns and body armor and all the rest of all these counties and state governments and stuff under the guise of anti-terrorism, but then they just end up using it for busting down doors to serve like petty drug warrants, and that's where people get shot. So
I, I,
it's
I, I legitimately can't wait until like the New South Wales Police has their own jets. It's gonna happen.
make for some good,
But,
compelling television when they get them on all those cop shows where they follow their cops around. Um,
Yep.
well, Labor, when they were in government, actually, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they cut the military?
Yes, yes, they did. They well,
Uh,
by cut. So they held their spending levels to be the same for about 5 years. So yes, cut, but not cut. I
So
don't know.
we don't need to be too scared in Australia then
Yeah,
of
yeah,
high-powered equipment filtering down.
no,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
more of a
So
US thing.
yeah, that is more of a US thing. But seeing as we've exhausted everything we can possibly talk about on this topic, I want to start signaling my virtues. And by that, I mean I want to talk about virtue signaling. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with virtue signaling, well, go look it up on Wikipedia.
Well, the
No,
better way to put it is just posturing. It's
post-
about that's the way I think about it. It's about like making yourself seem to everybody else to be a certain thing, whatever good thing that needs to be. So if you hang out with a bunch of lefties, then it's to be socially tolerant and to kind to the environment, and you hug polar bears, and if you're a conservative, then it's to beat up on the Muslims and blah blah blah.
really,
The
I
rest
thought it
of
would have been. I thought it would have been more to talk about the virtues of whatever tradition they favor, and it
mm,
depends on which conservative you're talking about. So
Oh,
Indian conservatives tend to be all about the virtues of Hinduism, but
yeah,
some tend to be about virtues of
just
Christianity.
yeah,
Yeah,
Judeo-Christian values.
and
Think
you
of
frequently hear about that.
mm,
So to that extent, virtue signaling is all about kind of going like, "Hey, look at me, and how much holier than thou." Well, maybe not. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but how much better I am,
well,
or how much more enlightened I am.
mm,
and it usually involves minimal work. I mean, it's just gloating that this is what I believe, or I've taken a stand against that article that I saw online. I mean, it's really, as the expression goes, piss
Facebook
poor
is made.
stuff.
Yeah, Facebook has made it incredibly easy to do. I think every one of us is guilty of doing it at least once. Um, and well, it's rather interesting that it's now being used as a way to sort of open up debates, I guess you could say. I would have never thought as virtual. I've generally thought of virtue signaling as something that's, done to try and shame someone else. But nowadays, at least on Facebook, it seems to spark a lot of controversy.
Maybe. I think a great example of this in practice is actually the minimum wage. So just to get on my hobby horse, um, obviously being a libertarian, I talk to a lot of people about this, and when you actually explain how the minimum wage works and how it keeps people out of work and all the rest of it, like people don't care because I think part of it is just deep down, and I don't want to like pathologize people, but like they believe they want poor people to be treated well and treated fairly, and so that even though there's all these negative consequences, that doesn't matter. Then I guess essentially saying we want a fair treatment for these poor workers. So I
Uh,
think
Everybody's
it's
equal in the breadline.
yeah, it's one of those things that when you actually start to explain things from like an economic perspective, and people still don't give up bad policy. So drug prohibition is probably another one, especially on the conservative side, where you know you say, okay, well, drug prohibition has all these terrible consequences for law and order, for families, blah blah, for the budget, blah blah, all this sort of stuff, and in the end, they still don't give it up because in the end, drugs are bad, and we need to say drugs are bad.
Yeah, I was actually gonna use the example of sweatshops.
Mm,
So in the West, so here's the thing. I have the experience of seeing this from the other side as well when I go to India and like the same topic is discussed. So in the West, sweatshops are bad. They need to be shut down. All these people are being paid really shit wages and stuff like that. But the reality is, on the other side, the sweatshops are actually higher. They pay more than what the locals pay.
mm,
They offer
Yes.
better conditions than what the locals have. Um, and basically, they're able to they're able to offer better services. Like for example, the money that it's not just money that they're paid. Like one thing that sweatshop workers get access to that normal people around the area don't get access to is healthcare.
mm,
And that's just because all these international companies have policies where they pay for healthcare. And lo and behold, people who didn't have healthcare before now have healthcare, and they're getting paid more than they would, at the competing places. It doesn't occur to people that labor is a competitive market in these countries,
mm.
and that yes, they're being paid less than what it is to live here in Australia, but they're being paid exceedingly well in that country, and it's not a competition between their job and my job. It's a competition between their job and all the other jobs there, and that's a good job to have.
It
Yes.
seems to me you're both saying that these silly virtue signalings on Facebook are actually a good way to reach out to people and explain, well, if you care about this issue, this is what you should consider.
Well, I think, well, I don't know about Lee. I'm not going to speak for Lee, but I'm actually saying the opposite of that because they don't actually change their mind on this one. They
Mm.
signal, so they're basically saying it is more virtuous to ignore reality and talk about this utopia that I believe in, rather than and ignore the consequences of the harm that I'm doing to these people, rather than their actual position.
Yeah, I guess for
Are
me,
we
it's
ta- are
like
we talking about a are we talking about a conversation on Facebook
I'm talking
or
about any
just in
conversation on Facebook, essentially, on this. Anytime someone virtue signals, you'll find out they will ignore any consequence or any real world information.
yeah, it,
They
it
want to, yeah.
it goes hand in hand with magical thinking. That is, there's I don't care how the world works. This is how I want the world to work, and I'm not going to like the fact that it doesn't work this way doesn't stop me from still wanting it to be that way. So yeah, it goes hand in hand with magical thinking, and I think that's why it's challenging. Like because when people say, well, I don't care about the consequences of this action, well, then what can they're not paying the costs themselves. Like that's part of the issue is that you've essentially got people who are better off, or in some way they don't experience what it is to be under these policies. And so, yeah, okay, my middle class mates don't know what it's like to have somebody break down your door and arrest you for having a couple of weed plants in your house. They don't know what it's like to have mental health issues, which means it's very hard to get work, and to have the situation where you're desperate. You can't get work because you can't get above that minimum wage. Like, they just don't live in that world, and so it's a completely free exercise for them because they don't have to pay the costs.
And with that, I'm actually going to end it because we've hit an hour. Congratulations, everyone! We did 1 hour for the very first episode of the year. So let's all give ourselves a round of applause and say that we're back for the year.
Yay!
Yeah.
And it's election year, so there's going to be heaps of political drama for us to talk about.
Heaps.
Absolutely. So just before I finish, I just want to say uh, I will be attaching a request on this post for this release that we are looking for more hosts. And yes, I've read some of your complaints that there aren't enough females hosts. If there are women that can come on Mondays at 8:30 and come on the show, please, address at the sorry, please email us or contact us at the page or even on
Is there such
ALS.
a thing as a gender-friendly time?
I don't know. I thought it might be the times, but like seriously, if you're available on 8:30 on a Monday, please, and have an opinion that you can talk about, let me know. I'm happy to have you on the show. And with that, I will end the first episode for the year. Bye.
Whoa.
See yous.
Bye.